Today Nintendo has released Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 on the Nintendo Switch, so it's exciting, but also nothing new. Nintendo has perfected the art of selling the same games over and over again. From the Nintendo Entertainment System classics repackaged on the Super Nintendo as Super Mario All-Stars to the Wii U titles brought back on Nintendo Switch, and now we're seeing Switch games coming to Switch 2. The cycle never really ends, so the real question is whether we're buying games or are we just buying nostalgia? And if you like this video, hit that subscribe button down below for even more Nintendo content here on Power Up Direct. Well, first of all, we've got Nintendo's nostalgia power. So Nintendo's biggest strength has never just been hardware, it's been the ability to create timeless characters and worlds that stick with people for decades. Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, Donkey Kong, these aren't just video game franchises, they're cultural touchstones. Generations of players grew up with them, and those same players are now adults with disposable income who are more than willing to pay again and relive their childhood memories. Nostalgia is a powerful marketing tool, and Nintendo knows exactly how to use it. The company doesn't just re-release games, it repackages memories. Super Mario All-Stars on the Super Nintendo wasn't just a compilation of games, it was an invitation for fans to revisit their first adventures with Mario, this time in 16-bit. Decades later, Nintendo pulled the same trick with Super Mario 3D All-Stars, bundling Mario's 3D outings into one package on Nintendo Switch. And the formula hasn't really changed, but it doesn't need to, because the emotional connection is what sells. Nintendo also leans on nostalgia to make its platforms feel essential. Why buy a new system? Because it promises the return of the games that you loved growing up, but now portable, sharper, and more accessible than ever. Whether it's a subscription service packed with Nintendo Entertainment System and Super Nintendo classics, or a remaster of a beloved Wii or GameCube title, Nintendo taps into that universal desire to recapture those early gaming memories. And as long as players want to revisit the past, Nintendo is always going to have something new to sell them, even if it's something really old. Next up, we got examples of re-releases across the eras. So one of the earliest and most famous examples of Nintendo reselling its classics is Super Mario All-Stars on the Super Nintendo. Originally released in 1993, it bundled the first 4 Mario games from the Nintendo Entertainment System with updated 16-bit graphics and sound. It wasn't just a celebration of Mario's history, it was also a way for Nintendo to cash in on people who had already bought once and now dressed up for a new console generation. Decades later, the same approach returned on Nintendo Switch's Super Mario 3D All-Stars for Mario's 35th birthday. That was a collection featuring Super Mario 64, Sunshine, and Galaxy, which is being re-released today, by the way. It was marketed as a limited time release which only amplified demand and pushed fans to buy quickly. Nintendo also experimented with a more digital approach through the Virtual Console, introduced on the Wii and later expanded on the Wii U and the 3DS. The service allowed players to buy older Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Nintendo, and N64 games individually, effectively reselling decades of content in a new format. Well, the catch, once the Wii U and 3DS shops closed, those games are locked to the hardware. If you didn't buy them before the shutdown, and if your system fails, that library is gone. It's a reminder of how fragile digital nostalgia can be. In the Switch era, Nintendo shifted strategies again with the Nintendo Switch Online subscription service. Instead of buying individual classics, players now pay an annual fee for access to a rotating library of Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Nintendo, Game Boy, Nintendo 64, and even Sega Genesis titles. This gives Nintendo a recurring revenue stream while ensuring players never own the games outright. The nostalgia is still there, but it's monetized as ongoing access rather than permanent ownership. Then you got the countless Wii U ports brought to the Nintendo Switch. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, Pikmin 3, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, they all found a second life on Nintendo's far more successful handheld console hybrid. And for many players, it was the first time experiencing these titles, since the Wii U's user base was very small. For Nintendo, it was a low-risk way to extend the life of the game they'd already developed, essentially doubling their sales across 2 generations. Well, next up, let's have a look at the pattern, and this is Nintendo's endless cycle. So when you look across Nintendo's history, a clear pattern emerges. Every generation of hardware is supported not by new releases, but by familiar games brought back again and again. The Nintendo Entertainment System classics moved to the Super Nintendo with Super Mario All-Stars. Decades later, Wii U games found a new home on Nintendo Switch. And now as the Switch 2 is here and available, even Switch games are being lined up for another re-release. It's a cycle that's repeated for over 30 years and fans have come to expect it as part of the Nintendo ecosystem. The strategy is almost self-reinforcing. Each generation of players is introduced to a mix of brand new games and repackaged classics. This keeps beloved franchises relevant while also giving Nintendo an easy way to fill release calendars with minimal development costs. The older the game gets, the more nostalgia it generates, making it even easier to resell to the next wave of fans. What looks like recycling on the surface is, in practice, a long-term cycle of reintroduction. The brilliance of this approach is that it blurs the line between preservation and profit. On one hand, Nintendo is keeping its legacy alive, ensuring modern players can still experience iconic games like Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time or Super Mario Galaxy without digging out old hardware. On the other hand, it means fans are often asked to pay multiple times for essentially the same experience. The pattern isn't about a one-time re-release, it's about creating a continuous loop where the past is always repackaged as part of the present. Well, next up, let's have a look at why fans still buy them. The most obvious reason fans keep buying Nintendo re-releases is nostalgia. These games aren't just pieces of software, they are emotional time capsules. So booting up Super Mario 64 or The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time instantly transports players back to their childhood living rooms, Saturday mornings, and, to be honest, simpler, probably less stressful times. That emotional hit is powerful, and Nintendo knows how to bottle it and how to sell it. When a re-release comes along, the chance to relive those moments, now on a shiny new system, it is often irresistible. Convenience also plays a huge role. Far easier to download a game on a modern console than to track an old cartridge, and also working hardware. Having classics available on a portable system like the Switch makes the prospect even more appealing. Suddenly, the game you played tethered to a TV in the 90s can be enjoyed on a train, in bed, or anywhere else. That new layer of accessibility makes old games feel fresh once again. Nintendo has also mastered the use of scarcity to drive demand. Limited physical runs, timed releases, and vaulted titles all create a fear of missing out. The release of Super Mario 3D All-Stars was a perfect example. Fans rushed to buy it, not only because they wanted the games, because they knew it would disappear from store shelves. This strategy turns nostalgia into urgency, ensuring players feel pressured to buy sooner rather than later. Fans also continue to purchase re-releases because Nintendo usually does just enough to make the old feel new. Slight graphical upgrades, modern controls, and bundled extras give the impression of added value. Basically, I could be describing the re-release of Super Mario Galaxy 1 and Galaxy 2 today. It's rarely a complete overhaul, but it doesn't need to be. Combination of emotional attachment, improved convenience, scarcity, and small updates is enough to keep players coming back, even if they already bought the same game 1 or 2 generations ago. Well, finally today we've got the dark side of digital nostalgia. So as magical as Nintendo's re-releases can feel, there is a darker side to how the company monetizes nostalgia. The biggest issue is ownership. So when players bought classics through the Wii, the Wii U, the 3DS Virtual Console, it felt like building a permanent library. But when those digital storefronts shut down, that promise of permanence vanished. Once your console breaks or the servers go offline, there's no way to re-download those games that you paid for. Nostalgia that once felt safe becomes fragile, tied entirely to Nintendo's decisions. This problem has only grown in the subscription era, so with Nintendo Switch Online, access to classic titles is bundled into a yearly fee. On the surface, feels like a great deal. Hundreds of games for the price of the retail release. But unlike the Virtual Console, you don't own any of the games. Your childhood favourites are essentially being rented, and the moment you stop paying, that access disappears. Nintendo has turned nostalgia into a subscription pipeline, ensuring players must pay indefinitely to revisit their memories. There's also the question of preservation. By tightly controlling when and how old games are made available, Nintendo decides which piece of its history survives in a playable form. Entire generations of games risk being lost when they're locked behind limited re-releases or subscription services. Fans who want to legally revisit these classics often have no choice but to pay again or watch them vanish when that support ends. So in the end, what seems like a celebration of gaming's past can just as easily become a reminder of how little control players actually have over the media they love. Digital nostalgia, when filtered through corporate strategy, becomes less about honouring history and more about reselling it. The comforting memories are still there, but they're increasingly bound to fragile online ecosystems and temporary access rights. And once those vanish, so do the digital keepsakes of an entire generation of players. Nintendo has built an empire not just in creating new experiences, but on reselling old ones. From All-Stars collections to Virtual Console libraries to Switch Online subscriptions, the company has turned nostalgia into a business model that spans generations. For fans, that can be both comforting and also frustrating. We get to relive the games that shaped our childhoods, but often at the cost of buying them again and again and again. Nintendo's greatest achievement may not be its hardware or innovation, but its ability to package our memories and sell them back to us. The real question is whether we're preserving the past, or are we simply renting it? Well, let me know what you think in the comments, but that is it for this video today on how Nintendo sells you nostalgia over and over again. As always, thank you so much for watching or for listening. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below for even more Nintendo content here on Power Up Direct. Thanks again, and I shall see you real soon.